"Don't touch that girl. Sell her to me," the cowboy said, and changed her fate for good. The sun was high in the sky, and the small town of Red Creek looked dry and tired. Dust moved slowly through the streets as the wind passed by. Wooden buildings stood quietly, and only a few people walked around, trying to stay out of the heat. Into this quiet town rode a cowboy named Eli Carter. Eli was not loud like other cowboys. He did not laugh much or talk too much. He rode his horse slowly, watching everything around him. His hat shaded his eyes, but nothing escaped his notice. After a long cattle drive, he only wanted some rest, food, and maybe a little peace. As he passed through the town square, something unusual caught his attention. Near a group of wagons stood a young girl, no more than 13 or 14. Her dress was old and dusty, and her shoes looked worn out. She stood quietly, holding a small bundle in her hands. Around her were a few traders talking loudly, not paying much attention to her as a person. To them, she seemed like just another problem to deal with. "She's no use to us," one man said, shaking his head. "Too quiet. Doesn't even speak much," another added. The girl kept her eyes down. She did not argue. She did not cry. She just stood there, as if she was used to hearing such words. Eli slowed his horse. There was something about her that felt different. She looked tired, yes, but not weak. There was a kind of quiet strength in her posture, like she was holding herself together no matter what happened. He stopped his horse and watched for a moment. One of the men turned and noticed him. "You need something, cowboy?" he asked. Eli looked at the girl again, then back at the men. "What's her story?" Eli asked calmly. The men shrugged. "Picked her up on the road. No family, no money. We've been feeding her, but she ain't helping much," one of them said. "Don't know what to do with her now," another added with a sigh. The girl finally looked up for a second. Her eyes met Eli's just for a brief moment. They were not full of fear, but something else. Maybe hope. Maybe just curiosity. Eli felt something shift inside him. He sat still for a second, then spoke in a firm but calm voice. "Don't touch that girl. Sell her to me." The men looked at each other, surprised. "Sell her?" one of them repeated. "What do you want with her?" Eli did not answer right away. He simply reached into his pocket and took out some money. "That's not your concern," he said quietly. "You said you don't need her. I do." The traders whispered among themselves. To them, it seemed like an easy deal. The girl was more trouble than help anyway. One of them nodded. "All right then, she's yours." Eli handed over the money without any argument. The girl stood still, confused. She did not understand what was happening. One moment she was unwanted, and the next moment, someone had decided to take her away. "Go on," one of the men said, pointing toward Eli. "You're going with him now." She hesitated. Eli noticed and gently spoke. "You don't have to be afraid. Just come along." His voice was calm, not harsh, not commanding. It felt different from what she had heard before. Slowly, she stepped forward. Eli got down from his horse and offered her a small nod. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she said softly. "Well, Lila," Eli replied, "we've got a bit of a ride ahead." He helped her climb onto the horse, making sure she was steady before he got on behind her. He did not rush her. He did not push her. As they began to leave the town, Lila looked back one last time. No one stopped her. No one called her name. It felt strange, but also different, like something had ended and something new was beginning. The road stretched out ahead of them, wide and open. For a while they rode in silence. Lila held onto the saddle carefully. She still didn't understand why this man had chosen her. She didn't know what would happen next, but something in his quiet way made her feel a little less afraid. Eli, on the other hand, kept his eyes on the road. He had made a simple choice in the town, but deep down, he knew that choice might change more than just one life. And as the dusty town disappeared behind them, neither of them realized how important this moment would become. The journey from Red Creek to Eli's ranch was long but quiet. The sun slowly moved across the sky, and the air became cooler as the day passed. Lila sat carefully on the horse, holding the saddle, unsure of what to say. She was not used to talking much, especially with strangers. Eli did not force a conversation. He understood silence. After some time, he spoke in a calm voice. "You hungry?" Lila nodded slightly. Eli stopped the horse near a small tree where there was a little shade. He got down and helped her step off safely. From his saddlebag, he took out some bread and dried meat, along with a small bottle of water. He handed them to her without saying much. "Eat slow," he said. "We've got enough." Lila looked at the food for a moment, then at Eli. No one had spoken to her like that before. Usually she had to wait or ask, but here he simply gave it to her. She sat down and began to eat quietly. Eli stayed a little distance away, giving her space. He leaned against the tree and looked out at the open land. The wind moved gently, and everything felt calm. After they finished, they got back on the horse and continued their journey. By the time the sun started to set, they reached a small ranch. It was not a big place, but it was clean and peaceful. There was a simple wooden house, a barn, and a few animals nearby. The land around it was wide and open, with soft grass and a few trees. Lila looked around, surprised. "This is home," Eli said. He helped her down again and walked toward the house. He opened the door and stepped inside. The house was simple but neat. A table stood in the middle, and a small fireplace rested in the corner. Eli turned to her and said, "You can stay here." Lila blinked, confused. "Here?" she asked softly. Eli nodded. "There's a small room in the back. It's yours." She did not move at first. "You don't want me to work?" she asked carefully. Eli looked at her, a little surprised by the question. "You'll help around the ranch," he said, "but not like before. You'll learn things, you'll rest, you'll eat. That's how it works here." Lila didn't fully understand, but she nodded slowly. Eli showed her the small room. It had a simple bed, a blanket, and a small window. The room was clean, and sunlight still touched the corner of the floor. "You can wash up and rest," Eli said. "I'll make something for supper." Lila stepped into the room and looked around. She touched the blanket gently, as if making sure it was real. She had never had a space like this before. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Later that evening, they sat at the table together. Eli placed a warm meal in front of her. "Eat," he said simply. Lila ate slowly, still not used to this kindness. They did not talk much, but the silence felt different now. It was not heavy. It was calm. The next morning, Lila woke up early. She stepped outside and saw Eli already working. He was feeding the horses and checking the fences. Lila walked closer. "Morning," Eli said. "Morning," she replied softly. He handed her a small bucket. "You can help me with the chickens," he said. Lila nodded and followed his instructions. He did not shout or rush her. He showed her step by step. Over the next few days, Lila began to learn simple things: how to feed animals, how to clean the barn, and how to carry water. Eli also showed her something new. One afternoon, he placed a small book on the table. "Do you know how to read?" he asked. Lila shook her head. "That's all right," Eli said. "We'll start slow." He pointed to a letter and said its sound. Then another. Lila listened carefully, trying her best to repeat. It was not easy, but she did not give up. Days passed, and something began to change. Lila started to smile a little. She walked with more confidence. Her voice became clearer. She was no longer just surviving, she was learning. One evening, as the sun went down, Lila stood outside, looking at the open land. Eli walked up beside her. "You're doing good," he said. Lila looked at him, unsure what to say. "Why did you take me?" she finally asked. Eli stayed quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you deserved better." Lila looked back at the horizon. For the first time, she felt something new. Not fear, not confusion, but hope. And as the stars slowly appeared in the sky, Lila realized that maybe, just maybe, her life was starting to change. Days slowly turned into weeks at the small ranch. Lila was no longer the quiet, unsure girl who had arrived from Red Creek. Each morning, she woke up with more energy and a clearer mind. The ranch was no longer a strange place. It was starting to feel like home. She moved with confidence now. Every day, she helped Eli with different tasks. She fed the chickens, cleaned the barn, and even learned how to guide the horses gently. At first, she was careful and nervous, but over time, her hands became steady. Eli noticed the change. One morning, he watched as Lila calmly led a horse across the yard. The animal followed her without resistance. Eli gave a small nod, impressed. "You've got a good way with animals," he said. Lila smiled a little. "They listen, if you stay calm," she replied. Eli chuckled softly. "That's something many people still don't understand." As the days passed, Eli continued teaching her new things. In the evenings, they sat together at the table with the small book. Lila practiced reading simple words. At first, she struggled, but she never gave up. "Try again," Eli would say kindly, and she always did. One night, she finally read a full sentence without stopping. She looked up, surprised. "I did it!" Eli smiled. "Yeah, you did." That small moment meant a lot to her. It wasn't just about reading. It was about believing she could learn something new. Little by little, Lila began to see herself differently. She was no longer just someone who followed orders. She was someone who could grow, think, and choose. One afternoon, a wagon passed by the ranch. Two people from town stopped to ask Eli about supplies. When they saw Lila working confidently, they seemed surprised. "Is that the same girl from Red Creek?" one of them whispered. "She looks different," the other said. Lila heard them, but this time she did not feel small. She stood straight and continued her work without hesitation. Eli noticed that too. Later that day he said, "You don't let words bother you anymore." Lila shook her head. "I used to, but now I know who I am." Eli gave a small nod. That was exactly what he had hoped for. As time went on, Eli began giving her more responsibility. "Can you take care of the west fence today?" he asked one morning. Lila paused. "By myself?" Eli looked at her calmly. "You can do it." She took a deep breath. "All right." She spent the whole afternoon checking the fence, fixing small problems, and making sure everything was strong. It was not easy, but she stayed focused. When she returned, Eli was waiting. "Well?" he asked. "It's done," she said, with a small but proud smile. "I knew it would be," Eli replied. That evening, as the sun began to set, they sat outside. The sky was filled with soft colors, and the air felt peaceful. Lila looked at the land around her. "This place, it changed me," she said quietly. Eli shook his head. "No, you changed yourself. I just gave you a chance." Lila thought about his words. For a long time, she had believed her life was decided by others. But now she understood something important. She had a choice. After a moment, she asked, "Why did you help me?" Eli stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "When I was young, no one helped me. I had to figure everything out alone. I always thought, if I ever got the chance, I'd do things differently." Lila listened carefully. "You saw something in me?" she asked. Eli looked at her and nodded. "I saw someone who didn't give up. even when things were hard. Lila felt something warm inside her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep right away. She sat by the small window in her room, looking out at the stars. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to think about the future. Not just the next day, but something bigger. What kind of person she wanted to be, what kind of life she wanted to build. And for the first time, those thoughts didn't feel impossible. The next morning, Lila woke up early again. But this time, she didn't just step outside to follow instructions. She stepped outside with purpose. Eli saw her standing there, looking at the land with a thoughtful expression. "You're thinking about something," he said. Lila nodded. "Yes." "What is it?" She looked at him and said, "I want to become someone who can help others too, like you did for me." Eli smiled, a little wider than usual. "That's a good goal," he said. And in that moment, it became clear. Lila was no longer just finding her place in the world. She was beginning to create her own. The seasons began to change around the ranch. The warm days slowly turned cooler, and the wind carried a fresh feeling across the open land. The trees near the ranch started to lose their leaves, and the sky looked wider than ever. But the biggest change was not in the land. It was in Lila. She was no longer the quiet girl who once stood in the dusty town square. Now, she moved with confidence and purpose. Her steps were steady, her voice clear, and her eyes full of life. Each day, she took on more responsibility. She helped plan the daily work, took care of the animals, and even guided small tasks without waiting for Eli to tell her what to do. The ranch had become a place where she truly belonged. Eli noticed everything, even though he didn't always say it. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Lila was already outside, checking the horses. Eli stepped out of the house and watched her for a moment. "You're up early," he said. Lila smiled. "There's a lot to do." Eli nodded. "You handle it well." She paused, then said, "I learned from you." Eli shook his head slightly. "You learned because you wanted to." Lila thought about that. She had changed not just because someone helped her, but because she chose to grow. Later that day, a small wagon arrived at the ranch. Inside it was a young boy and an older man. They looked tired, much like Lila had once looked. The man spoke with Eli, asking if there was any work available. Eli listened quietly. Lila stood nearby, watching. She could see the same uncertainty in the boy's eyes, the same feelings she once had. Eli looked at Lila for a moment, then back at the man. "We might have some work," Eli said, "but things are done a little differently here." The man nodded. "We're willing to learn." Eli turned to Lila. "What do you think?" Lila was surprised. "You're asking me?" she said. Eli gave a small smile. "You're part of this place." Lila stepped forward and looked at the boy. "It's not just about work," she said gently. "It's about learning, helping, and respecting each other." The boy nodded quietly. Lila turned back to Eli. "They can stay." Eli nodded. "All right." That day marked something important. The ranch was no longer just Eli's. It had become something more. Over the next few weeks, Lila helped the new arrivals settle in. She showed them how things worked, just like Eli had once shown her. She was patient, kind, and understanding. "You'll get it," she told the boy one day when he struggled with a task. "Just keep trying." Her words sounded familiar because they were the same words Eli had once told her. Eli watched this from a distance. He didn't say much, but there was quiet pride in his eyes. One evening, as the sun began to set, Eli and Lila sat outside the house. The sky was painted with soft orange and pink colors, and the land stretched far into the distance. "You've done something special here," Lila said. Eli looked at her. "We've done something." Lila smiled. After a moment, Eli spoke again. "You know, if you ever want to leave and find your own path, you can," he said. "You don't have to stay here." Lila looked out at the land, thinking carefully. A long time ago, she had no choices. Now she had many. She could leave. She could start somewhere new. She could follow any path she wanted. But after a moment, she shook her head. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "Not because I have to, but because I want to stay." Eli nodded slowly. "That's what matters." Lila took a deep breath. "This place gave me a new life," she said. "I want to help others find the same thing." Eli smiled, proud but quiet. The stars slowly began to appear in the sky. Days turned into more weeks, and the ranch grew stronger. More people came, not because they were forced, but because they needed a chance. And Lila was always there to welcome them. One morning, as the sun rose brightly, Lila rode a horse across the open land. Her posture was strong, her hands steady, and her eyes focused ahead. She was no longer someone waiting for life to decide her fate. She was someone who shaped it. Eli stood near the house, watching her ride into the distance. A small smile appeared on his face. That simple moment in the dusty town, when he made a quiet decision, had changed everything. Not just for Lila, but for many others who would come after her. And as Lila rode forward, free and confident, it was clear. She was never someone to be owned. She was someone meant to rise.